Hello out there in Trivia Land, in America, North America, or the world, wherever you're listening. This is Jeremy Conman. This is Quizzing in America. Every episode, I like to talk to somebody in the trivia industry, somebody who's been writing questions, hosting pub quizzes, does something involving quizzing or trivia. And today, I am joined by my friend David Abolafia from the great state of Florida. And he hosts not just one, but he hosts a couple of different games for a couple different companies down there. We're going to get to know him, his background in trivia, how he goes about writing his questions, what he likes to do when he's hosting and not hosting, and he may be starting his own thing soon. So we're going to find out a little bit more about that. But welcome, David. How are you? How's Florida? How are things going down there?
Things are going well. It's always an interesting time in this state, in this day and age. But as far as trivia and everything is concerned, it's a very happening place.
Yeah, you're the first Florida man I've had on Quizzing in America. So,
Now, Florida man, that implies something else completely.
fair enough. Fair enough. So David, now you trivia has not been your like main profession in life. It's something you've done as a hobby and as an aside, and of course you've hosted some pub quizzes. But tell me a little something about your history. Did you grow up? Were you on the Quiz Bowl team in high school? Did you grow up? Are you a trivia nerd, game lover? Like, how did you get into this? How did you stumble into one hosting and two writing?
Well, I sort of come by it honestly. My mother was on the original Jeopardy back in 1965. And so trivia and knowledge and questions and answers were always kind of around when I was growing up. And of course, Trivial Pursuit kind of kicked that into another gear. And then, yes, I was on the Quiz Bowl team in high school. And strangely enough, recently reconnected with our Quiz Bowl coach via Facebook. And then started going to pub quizzes when we moved to Florida, and because it hadn't really taken off here in the U.S. until sort of the mid 2000s, and that's when I sort of got into it here.
Okay, and how long have you been hosting?
I started hosting as basically the pub quiz I went to. I one day just went up to the host and said, if you ever need somebody to fill in for you, I'm available. And so that would have been about 13, 14 years ago.
Okay.
And then that place closed. The restaurant itself where we went closed due to health reasons. And then I kind of very accidentally stumbled on another trivia place here in town. My parents were in town and they said, hey, why don't we go to Applebee's, grab a burger? And we went, and there was a guy doing trivia there that night. And so we played, we won, and my wife and I became regulars at his game. And again, at some point, I just went up to him and said, hey, if you ever need a sub. So I subbed periodically, and then he decided to hand off that Applebee's show to me. And so that became my show. And then when we started or when his company started another show a little farther south, that was mine from the get-go. And I did that one at a place called Off the Wagon in Venice, Florida, for a little over 7 years. And then the restaurant closed. And they kept saying that when they reopened, they'd have us back. And nothing ever happened with that. But then the people that used to run Off the Wagon opened a new place, and they have us in now. So that's my Monday show.
Now, where is Venice, Florida? Is that on the Gulf side, the ocean?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah, I live in Sarasota, so Venice is about 20 miles south of me.
okay?
And yeah, it's just a great place because we've got a lot of regular players and people who followed me from one venue to the other, and so yeah,
so you started hosting or filling in as a sub, whatever, 12, 13 years ago. When did you actually start taking on some writing responsibilities and creating some content for these quizzes?
From the get-go. I always and as an example, I mean, part of it is for me as a host, because I came at it as a player, that was always my main focus, was to make sure that the players are having a good time, that the questions are challenging but not impossible, and also well constructed, so there's not the debate about whether things are right or wrong, which is always frustrating. I mean, I actually went and played trivia last night, And there were three separate questions where I had to go up to the host and say, no, the question
Yeah.
is wrong. And, and I can see that it's frustrating. And so that's why with the companies that I work for, one of them is a pen and paper company, and they send out the questions to the hosts the day of the show. And I always go over them and then report back and say, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, mostly for the host's sake, so that they don't have to deal with people like me.
Yeah, well, you know what, and it's great to have somebody on the inside of a quiz that does that, because it's never fun, when you're hosting a quiz and you ask a question if you're not the one that's written it, and somebody comes up to you and says, well, this and that, and I don't like to be that guy either, but I do like to politely go up to a host sometimes if I see a problem with a question. And I'll give you an example. Just last week I played a quiz, and where St. Patrick's Day is upon us as we're recording this. It's tomorrow, so there was some St. Patrick's themed questions in this quiz, or Irish themed questions, I should say. And one of the questions the person asked was, according to legend, what object gives you good luck if you kiss it in Ireland? And there's nothing inherently bad about that question, because I think the answer is relatively obvious, at least what they're going for. The problem is, the legend is not that it gives you good luck if you kiss it. The legend is that it makes you loquacious, or gives you the gift of gab, and makes you an elegant speaker, which I was not very elegant when I just said that. But it's, of course, the Blarney Stone, right? So I went up to the host and I just said, listen, I'm not sure where you're sourcing this from, but unless you're looking for something other than the Blarney Stone, and if you are, forgive my saying this, you're not correct in saying, like that's not what kissing the Blarney Stone gives you. And he was like, oh, no, that's what it. I'm like, no, if you look it up, trust me, that's not what it is. Now, I think it's very obvious what you're looking for. And I don't think anybody missed the question, right? Like, everybody knew he was looking for the Blarney Stone. But if you'd asked the question the other way and he said, according to legend, kissing the Blarney Stone gives you what? And then he had taken good luck as a correct answer, I'd have been like, well, now that's just wrong. So
yeah, I mean, and that was something that came up last night. I mean, there was a question that was asked in 2007: who became the only person to have won both a Nobel Peace Prize and an Academy Award? And
George Bernard Shaw.
No.
Oh,
because
Nobel
Shaw.
Peace Prize. Sorry, my bad. And Al Gore didn't technically win the Academy Award, right?
That's exactly it. And so I went up to her and I said, I have a feeling you're asking about Al Gore, but he didn't actually win the Oscar. That went to the director of the film, Davis Guggenheim. And so she ended up throwing out the question. Because with that kind of question, there's no way to fix it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could say only person to win a Nobel Peace Prize and accept an Academy Award, because he did accept the award. But
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
But the other, because and Shaw and Dylan both won their Nobel Prizes for literature.
Yes. Yes, not the Peace Prize.
But the other question, it was basically boiled down to what was the highest charting song for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, except that the answer was Free Fallin', which is not the
Heartbreakers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I had written down something else, and when I went back to my table and looked it up, it's like, wait a minute. If I'd known it was just Tom Petty, I would have answered this. And so then I went back up to the host, and she said she then, for everybody else, corrected it. She accepted my answer and she corrected it for everybody else, and saying it's just a Tom Petty song.
Yeah. And it's funny. I have such a memory of that song, Free Fallin'. I got my first ever, like, legit, real working in a store job where I got like a paycheck when I was 14 years old in 1989, and working in a sports card store in a mall.
Okay.
And it was right when Free Fallin' was a huge hit. And it was playing on the mall, played music, and that song played over and over and over again. So I will always associate that song with, but I do remember it was Full Moon Fever. It was a Tom Petty solo album, and it was a great album, and it's a great song. But yeah, no Heartbreakers on that one. So yeah, no, it's little stuff like that. And it's always great, I think, to have somebody on the inside who can look at that. And I try, and when I do make those corrections, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, right? Like, you don't want to just run up to the host and interrupt them while they're speaking and be rude about it. You want to wait till there's a break in the game, go up to them and say, hey, by the way, I don't know if you wrote the question or not, or I don't know who wrote the question, but I'm familiar with this for this reason. And this is, like, I'm pretty sure that this might be a better answer or also be an acceptable answer. And just try and be nice about it and understand that, a lot of times the person hosting a pub trivia game has not written the material. And they are not a
Mhm.
fact checker. And so they're not always going to catch stuff like that. But people like you and I, who are, I guess, trivia nerds, for lack of a better term, will certainly catch that and will try and point it out. Now, how do you deal that when you're hosting? When somebody comes up, is there a way that you like to deal with situations like that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, let me check into that if they're saying, that this is an acceptable answer or something along those lines. And if I find that their answer is correct, I will certainly give them credit. I had one come up this past week because one of the companies, they do a hint on Facebook for one of the questions. They'll throw out just something that's a hint to an answer for that night's games on their Facebook page. And so last Wednesday, the hint that was given was the larger ones are sometimes called capes. And then it turned out to be a question about what the term is for an outcropping that juts out into the water with a steep face, etc. And the answer that they were going for was headland,
Huh.
which which is fine, but the problem is that if you didn't see the Facebook hint, or even if you did, Cape still answers that question.
Yeah.
And so it's like I have to accept that as an answer. I mean,
Sure.
it's not what I was expecting, but that happens. And I've never had a situation where, or I shouldn't say never. I've rarely had a situation where I've just said to the player, "No, you're wrong." But the important thing, and this is something that I learned at a show that I no longer host because I was hosting up until COVID. That at one point the manager came up to me and said, "People are saying the questions are kind of hard," and I was like, "Okay, I can fix that because as a host, there's no benefit to me stumping people because then they won't enjoy the show, and so it's easy enough for me to fix that. So it's always a matter of trying to give the players as much leeway as possible so that
Yeah, my
it's
my
more
policy is
enjoyable for them.
always it's better to award points than not to award points. I want to give you points if at all possible. I try and, I don't want any question I ask to have a zero get rate usually, and I usually don't want any question to get or at least not many to have 100% get rate, right? Like I want there to
Right.
be every question should have some people that are like, maybe a few didn't know it, but most do. And then some will be only a few knew it, but most didn't. But I like to have every question be answered by somebody, right? Like if you're not doing that, you probably need to go back and look at how you're writing the questions and see what's going on and see if you can, try and make them more accessible in some way, shape, or form. Because, yeah. And I think also, it's always good to start out with the easy ones, right? Lull people in with that,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I know this. I'm going to play the game. And then, get a little harder as you progress. And hopefully,
Well, that was something that was always an issue for me with, again, with one of the companies that I work for, that they would have as the final question in their games is one of those put these things in order kind of
mhm.
questions. And half the time it was something that was so random. There's no way you could know the answer to this. And so it was just kind of a crapshoot as to whether or not anybody was going to get it right. And oftentimes I had them come up where nobody got them right. And especially because it's, like a Final Jeopardy where you're wagering and things like that. And I just said, I don't like these questions. And recently I went out and at my shows and asked the players, do you like these kinds of questions? And it was basically given a universal, no, we hate them.
Yeah, well, I mean, because yeah, you're right. It's like basically you're playing the lottery with a question like that, right? There are ways you can
Mhm.
ask questions like that because usually you're putting things in chronological order, you're putting things in a numerical order from lowest to highest, and there are certain questions you can ask, like how many presidents have been assassinated? Where like, okay,
Mhm.
somebody's going to know the answer to that is four, and then you ask
Mhm.
something like how many Canadian provinces are there? And somebody will, you can use things where you can know the answer. But then there's other types of those questions where you're like, what's the population of, and you give a random city or a random state, or what's the boiling point of a random element. And those are things people just won't know the answers to. So it's really just guesswork. And so, yeah, I tend to not like those as much either. And I think there are better ways, or if you're going to ask those questions, there are ways you can ask them that makes a lot more sense and makes them a little bit more enjoyable and not so much of a crapshoot. And I play games where, yeah, the final question is often put these four things in order. But depending on the question, I played a game the other day. It was actually a finals for a company up here, and the final question was put these four men in order by number of times they have hosted Saturday Night Live, which I think is somewhat okay. But the four people they
Mhm.
chose had hosted 5, 6, 7, and 8 times. And so it was like, really, you had to basically know exactly who. And they were Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Elliot Gould, and Christopher Walken. And I know the Five
Mhm.
Timers Club. I know I can name you pretty much everybody in it, but I don't know exactly how many times each guy has hosted. So I thought that was like, we were luckily in the
Well,
lead. We bet zero and nobody overtook us, right? Yeah. So with that, are there question types that you do like? So we know you don't like the put these four things in order.
well, the main thing for me is, and this is something that I first came across. I had been a subscriber to Games Magazine for many, many years. My mother got me a subscription one year for my birthday, and I kept it up for a long time. But there was an article that I read in Games Magazine, and this is how I learned about Learned League. And because there was an interview with the guy who runs Learned League. And one of the things he said in the article was about having questions that have multiple ways that you can figure them out. That, it shouldn't be an either you know it or you don't kind of question. That, and so when I write questions, I like to be able to just provide some more information or something that can get you there, even if it's an oblique hint, but something so that if you don't know the basic fact outright, you can kind of work your way into it. Because again, it's the same thing. It's like, if someone asked right now, who is the president of Taiwan? I don't even know if Taiwan has a president, but it's like, I have no, and there's no way, unless you're someone who reads The Economist and everything like that, I'm not going to know that, or someone who just studies heads of state. But you want to be able to try and figure out the question, because again, if you don't know the basic information, you're out of luck. And especially when it comes to a question, like in most pen and paper games, that they have a halftime question. And at one point we had one where it was name the character that these actors played on this particular TV show. Well, it's like, if you don't watch the TV show, you're dead in the water.
Yeah. And
And
that
so,
makes it tough. Yeah, I just recorded an episode of the Nerd Trivia podcast with Andrew Bucksbaum, and he had a
right.
question. It was a current events question, I think, and he asked what singer was planning to go into space, and I had no idea, but he also gave the additional clue that she was the first woman to have an album with 5 number 1 hits, which I do know is Katy Perry.
Katy
So I
Perry.
was like, oh, well, I had no idea she was going into space, but thank you for that other in, right? If you give somebody at least a couple of ways to attack a question, you can get there. So now you've said you host for multiple companies. We're going to talk a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about those companies and their games. At least one of them's a pen and paper game. Is one of them an
Right.
app-based game or answer on your phone?
Yes.
Or okay, so
Right.
tell me what are those companies? If you can shout them out, give them a name.
Sure. The first one, the one that I've been working for the longest, they're called Game Show Trivolution, and they're based here in Southwest Florida. But at the same time, we do corporate events all over the place. At one point, my boss, a company, flew him out to Texas to do an event there. And we use an app called Speed Quizzing.
Oh,
And
speed quizzing. I had Bobby Roast Beef, who is, I don't know if you know who that is. He's a host in Western Massachusetts. He was on, I think,
Mhm.
the 4th or 5th episode, and he is like an ambassador for speed quizzing in the US. I've played that.
And what I like, I mean, there are a lot of things that I like about speed quizzing. One being that it is a fast game, that you generally do a lot more questions in a show than you would in a pen and paper game. And it allows you to, just play around with things. And also because for the most part, when you're doing the regular game, it's about typing in just the first letter of something.
Sure.
It's not, you don't have to spell anything out. You don't have to fill out a short answer or anything like that. So it gives teams an opportunity to guess and and possibly get it right, even if you have no idea. And I always say that to people that, there's no penalty for a wrong answer. So even if you have no idea, might as well take a guess or two. It can't hurt. And, it's like,
if you ask what's the capital of New Mexico, they don't have to spell out Albuquerque, but Albuquerque is not the capital. They just have to type in the letter S, not A, and they get credit, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you have, and I often say, you can be right for the wrong reason. Even if you think that that it's something else, if it starts with the same letter, it works.
Yeah, I much prefer the pen and paper game, but of the app-based games that I've played, I think speed quizzing is one of the more creative and fun variants. And also, it's kind of cheat-proof because it is called speed quizzing, and speed is such a factor. You can't look up the answers. I mean, you just don't have time. If you do, you're not going to win. So,
in all the time that I've been hosting speed quizzing games, I've had 2 instances of teams cheating. One of them was during a music round where they were using like Spotify or Shazam or something like that to get the songs. And then the other one, the thing is that they were being so blatant about it. It was ridiculous. And like everybody knew it. So it just, when it came time to.
Well, and I mean, were they winning even though? Because I think with speed quizzing, they were. Okay. Because I think with speed quizzing, it's very hard to both cheat and win, because I think, if people know the answers, they're going to answer it before you've looked it up and answered.
Well, but at the same time with speed quizzing, it's one of those things where it's more important to be right than to be fast. So even if you forego all the speed bonuses, you'll still score well.
Maybe, yeah. I suppose that's possible.
But I mean, the thing is that they did kind of like cheaters' cardinal rule number 1. Don't be obvious about it, because our games have the speed quizzing games always have like a closest to question in the middle of the game. And
when you're nailing it on the button every time, it's like, oh, that's interesting.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I even say that when it's just my regular people, I say, because you do get a bonus if you get it on the nose, but you'll also get some strange looks. And because sometimes they are just completely random things. But for me, that's okay. It's one question. It's fun. It's silly, because a lot of times because those questions I usually get from speed quizzing, and they'll be about really bizarre world records and things like that. And
things nobody should just have in their head for the most part.
Right. I mean, because that's just it. Is I've also had questions like that, like how many cards are there in an Uno deck? Well, that
108.
If you've played Uno, you know that.
So Game Show Trivolution uses speed quizzing.
Right.
And then what's the other company?
They're called Trivia Challenge, which I think there may be more than one of them. Technically, they're Trivia Challenge of Sarasota. And they are a fairly broad, they have a lot of venues in my area. There's like one chain of pubs they all use Trivia Challenge, and all of their games start at the same time. So that's part of the reason why there's a call for hosts, is because they all need different hosts, because they're all at the same time.
Now, is Trivia Challenge the same as Challenge Entertainment? Do you know what Challenge Entertainment is?
No, it is not.
Challenge Entertainment's a national company based out of Tennessee. Trivia Challenge is different than that.
Right. My understanding, I didn't get into the inner workings of things, but my understanding is, strangely enough, that very first trivia show that I played at the restaurant that got closed for health reasons, it's actually that company that got sold to 2 brothers who now run it. And the guy who ran it back then still writes the questions.
Okay.
That was part of the arrangement when he sold the company. And so, that's the one where at the start of every show day that you're hosting, they send you the questions. And so I always, I go over them. I, let other hosts know if there are questions that are problematic. But the other thing that I do, and this is something that kind of makes me stand out a little bit among pen and paper hosts, and it's was done for completely selfish reasons, is that I bring a separate monitor and I put my questions up on a screen. And I do that basically because a couple of years ago, I went through a period where I had, in the course of about 6 to 8 months, I had bronchitis twice and pneumonia once. And so I was just doing whatever I could to preserve my voice. And so I just wanted to make it so that I didn't have to repeat questions, that I
Sure.
could read them twice and say, that's it. Or if someone came up, could you just read that again? And I just point to the screen. So, and people like that. I mean, I have people all the time coming up, taking a picture of the question on the screen so they can bring it back to the table, and which is fine. But it allows
And
people to read it, and especially because, I'll, and I'm sure you've experienced this, and other hosts experience this. The people will come up and say, "Did you say this?" And it's like, "No, read the
sure,
question. It's right
having a
there."
visual is very nice. Another thing I started doing, and as far as I know, I was the one that kind of, I guess, maybe created this form of trivia, is I would not only put the question on a screen, I would add in a picture, and the picture
Mhm.
was completely unrelated to the question, other than if you could identify the picture, it would give you a hint to the answer. And when I say that, I
Mhm.
mean, if I ask you, who was the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers when they won their first Super Bowl, I might put a picture up of Miley Cyrus, because Miley Cyrus played Hannah Montana, and the answer is Joe Montana. So if you look at the picture and you go, oh, that's Miley Cyrus. Oh, but she's young. That's like Hannah Montana years. Oh, wait, Joe Montana was a quarterback of the Niners. The picture can help you get to the answer. It doesn't necessarily give it to you right off. And I've seen other companies that have done that since I started doing it, 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And maybe it existed before, but one of the reasons I did that was to allow people to have another in to get to the answer without having to make the question even simpler. Not only could you read the question, but now you also get a picture clue. And then when you see the answer pop up, you see a little caption that explains why that picture was used. And it also lets me sometimes make some jokes at the question or the picture's expense. Like if I ask you, in what movie did Jim Carrey play a character named Lloyd Christmas? And I show you a picture of Kanye West and somebody else, and the answer is Dumb and Dumber, I'm taking
Yep.
a crack at Kanye as well, right? So
Yes.
people can kind of get a chuckle out of that, and it's a fun way. So tell me about Trivia Challenge. What's their format? How does a game run? And then maybe we'll run into a game here, and
Mhm.
we'll see how I do.
Okay. So basically, it's 6 rounds, 3 questions per round, and you have point values that you assign based on your answers. But because each question is done one at a time, you can decide which point value you want to use. You must use each point value once per round. There's a halftime and a final question, which are different. And then the second half of the game, it's 2, 4, and 6. But we always announce the categories ahead of time, so you can write them down and decide how you want to dish out your points. And it's general trivia, but they tend to have they always start and end with true false questions. They always have a lyric line or a lost lyrics question. And yeah, I mean, those are the only things that you can see
Okay.
every week.
All right.
Uh,
Do you have a game
so
handy? Can we play one?
I do. Sure,
All right.
absolutely.
Let's
Um,
jump into it then.
okay, and this is one that I put together on my birthday. So I would
Okay.
say that these questions are all adjacent. They're not about me, but I have a connection to all of these questions.
Well, I think that's good for me because I think we are close to a similar age, and we're both former tournament Scrabble players. I think we're both middle-aged white men from a Jewish background. Like, I mean, we have a lot in common, so we
Yes.
should have some me adjacent stuff here.
All right. So round one, question one is in religion. And the name of what ceremony after which a child becomes responsible for following Jewish religious obligations comes from Hebrew words meaning son of the commandment. I had mine on my 13th birthday.
Well, speaking of our Jewish background, I believe that would be a bar mitzvah. I
That is
I
correct.
I did not have a bar mitzvah. I was very stubborn as a child and refused to go to Hebrew school, and somehow my parents allowed me out.
Well, if you're if you're someone who has a December birthday, if you're not Jewish, you often have the issue of, they try to mash your birthday and Christmas together, and you feel gypped
Yeah.
as far as. Well, in 1982, December 11th was my birthday, my bar mitzvah, and the first day of Hanukkah all on the same day.
A little triple threat. I like it.
Yes.
All right. By the way,
All
I'm
right.
wagering 5 on that one in case I
Okay.
didn't make it clear.
Yeah.
So I've got 5 points. We'll go to question 2.
All right. In movie line, what 2001 rom-com ends with the Duke of Albany introducing Kate McKay of the McKays of Massapequa, which just so happens to be my hometown?
Huh. So 2001 comedy, Kate McKay of Massapequa. I'm trying to think back to 2001. That was a long time ago. Oh boy. So I have no idea if this is right, but there was a rom-com called Kate and Leopold with Meg Ryan. And I mean, I assume they get married. I don't know what Kate's last name was or became when they got married, but I will go Kate and Leopold for 1 because I'm not sure at all.
And that is correct. And
oh, wow.
When I saw this movie in the theater in Douglaston, New York, that last line happened and I cracked up, and literally everybody in the theater turned to look at me like, what is wrong with you? And it's just, all right, good job. All right. And question number 3 in round 1. In health, what British physician provided the first account of a form of lymphoma and blood disease in 1832? The disease is now named for him, though the variations that technically aren't named for him, one of which I was diagnosed with in 2012, are far more common.
Okay, so I will assume I know that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a thing, so I will go with Hodgkin's and that is my 3-pointer, I guess, because yeah.
Well, in my game, I would give you credit for that. On Jeopardy, you would not get credit for that because his last name is Hodgkin, no S on it. But yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's a
Hodgkin's
fair point. I appreciate the credit, though. I would also, in a pub quiz setting, I would also award the points on that. Yeah.
But
I
yes,
should have known. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is an apostrophe S, so his last name is clearly Hodgkin. Sure. Yes. Okay, so after 1 round, I've got 9 points. We're going on to round 2, and I guess we forgot to go over the categories. You give the 3 categories so people have it.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what are the categories for round 2?
They are Shakespeare, cocktails, and photography.
Okay.
All right.
And none of which are my strong suits. But
round 2, question 1, Shakespeare. I once wrote a TV pilot inspired by Shakespeare's As You Like It. What are the last 2 words of this quote from the play and also the title of my pilot? All the world's a stage and all the men and women, blank, blank.
Are merely players. So you want the last 2 words, right?
Yes.
So merely players? Well, all right. Merely players for 5. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Yep. And all right.
By this, did you actually write a pilot?
Yes. I mean, it never went anywhere. It's something that I wrote for a writing contest. Basically, we had to write a script for an existing show and one that was completely made up. But the thing is that I was informed about the contest something like 10 days before the deadline. So fortunately, I had actually started writing this particular one beforehand. So, but yeah, it was basically, if you take the idea of a show where it can change at any time, like things are going wrong on stage, but it's not a stage thing. That's where I was going with it. Okay, in
question
cocktails,
2.
The Prohibition era cocktail made with white rum, fresh pineapple juice, grenadine, and maraschino liqueur was named for what Canadian-American film actress who co-founded United Artists, where my grandmother used to work?
Ooh, wow. God, what is her name? Old-timey actress Mary Pickford. That is, she's got a cocktail named after her. And I do remember, I don't know if you'd have asked me her name for founding United Artists, but I remember that fact about her. So Mary Pickford for 3.
And that is correct. Yes. Yeah. My grandmother worked for United Artists, and she talked about, see Charlie Chaplin just kind of wandering around the office, things like that. So that was
You've got a fascinating background, sir. You got a grandmother's hanging out with Charlie Chaplin. You're writing TV pilots. I mean, we're gonna have to get into that in another time. But let's move on to photography.
Okay, photography. A print of the famous 1932 photograph "Lunch Atop a Skyscraper," which shows a construction crew sitting down and eating while perched on an open beam, hangs in my bedroom. Within two, how many workers are pictured?
Oh boy. Well, I'm glad this is my one pointer. Okay, so I want to say it's at least six. You said within two. So I think there's at least six, minimum of six. So since I get within two, if I say eight, I have 6 to 10 covered. And I don't think there's more than 10. So I'm going to say eight for one.
Okay, and that is incorrect. There actually
Oh,
are 11.
oh, I was so close. Well, there goes the perfect game. Oh, I should have just upped it one if I'd only thought there had to be at least seven. Oh well. Yeah, I mean,
But
I know exactly what you're taking. And by the way, I really actually like questions like that where, it's a photo that most people can picture in their head. You've seen it in one form or another, but you're not going to know exactly. And you've given that range of within two, so you've given me the opportunity to say, well, okay, I think it has to be a minimum of this. So let me go two over that. And then, though it didn't pay off in my favor in that point. So now I'm at 17 points
17.
through 2 rounds. What are my categories for round three?
All right. You've got music, TV, architecture, and education.
All right.
All right. So, music/TV. Written by Quincy Jones, The Street Beater was ranked by Rolling Stone as the #3 TV theme song of all time. It's also my current ringtone. What sitcom, which ran from 1972 to 1977, opened and closed each episode with this funky track?
It is a great, and funky really helps in that. And also the fact that I'm old like you helps in this. I believe it was based on a British sitcom, Sanford and Son, with the legendary Red Fox. And that's 5 points.
Okay, yes. And that is correct on all counts. And the original British show is called Steptoe and Son.
Yeah.
All right. And round three, question two in architecture. What Art Deco skyscraper, where I worked from 1997 to 2000, was the tallest building in the world from 1929 to 1931?
All right. So this is obviously in New York. So the question is it the Chrysler Building or is it the Empire State Building? And I think that this is the Chrysler Building. So I'm going to go with the Chrysler Building.
For how many points?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. My other category was what again for the third one? Education.
Education.
I think I'm confident enough to go three.
And it is indeed the Chrysler Building. I actually worked in both those buildings. The Chrysler Building for 4 years, and then the Empire State from 2000 until I moved here. So it's interesting being up that high in New York on a regular basis, especially in the Empire State Building, because the Empire State Building has updrafts. So we would get just really weird weather where we were because I was on the 65th floor. Like it would snow up and things like that.
Yeah. And you never know when you're going to look out the window and see a giant ape crawling along the side of the skyscraper. So,
or someone jumping off,
which or that never happened. Yeah. All right.
Education.
My education level is for 1 point.
Okay. What university, the oldest technological university in the English-speaking world and my alma mater, celebrated its 200th anniversary in 2024?
Okay. The oldest. Wow. Trying to think, like Georgia Tech is the first thing that comes to. Oh, and you're a New Yorker though. What's that RPI? Do I need to know? It's like Ren. The
initial will be fine.
Okay, RPI is my answer for 1 point. You're a New York guy.
RPI is correct. That is, yeah. And what led to my sojourn into stand-up comedy at one point is the fact that I have a liberal arts degree from a technical school. So,
and why shouldn't you, with all the things you've done, have dabbled in stand-up comedy? I thought I had kind of a varied path. You have a very eclectic life. I think it's fun though. It makes for good stories and I think it makes for you a great trivia writer because you've experienced a whole lot of things, met a whole lot of different people. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is the job that I had when I was working in the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building was in public relations. And when I was hired for the job, the president of the company said to me that people are going to think you're full of crap because no matter what they're talking about, you've written about it. And at this job, I literally, from food to cars to nuclear waste, I wrote about it. So I had a little bit of knowledge about everything, which absolutely fed my trivia
Sure.
background.
All right, so we've come to the half, and I am at 26 out of 27, one off of perfect. And I believe our halftime,
Yes,
and you said is going to be what, four things, 2 points per answer, something like that?
right, 3 points per answer.
Three
And for
points.
this, again, because this was from my birthday, based on each description, identify the famous person born on December 11th. And the first one is a politician who was born in 1882, lived to 1947, New York City mayor and airport namesake.
Got that one. All right. Go
All
ahead.
right. Number two, Puerto Rico born dancer, singer, and actress, born in 1931, third person to complete an EGOT.
Okay.
Number three, American author, born in 1979, best-selling writer of It Ends With Us. And number four, American actress and singer, born 1996, recently engaged to quarterback Josh Allen.
All right, so the first one is obviously LaGuardia. The second one is Rita Moreno. The actress singer engaged is Haley Steinfeld. The author born in 79, It Ends With Us. I'm pretty sure it was written by a woman. Unfortunately, I don't know what woman, and I know I'm not going to come up with what woman. So we are going to say Harris.
All right, well, you do get the 9 points because the three you said are correct. Fiorello LaGuardia, Rita Moreno, and Haley Steinfeld. And the author of It Ends With Us is Colleen Hoover.
I've heard of her, wasn't going to come up with that. Yeah, sorry, Colleen. I should, and sorry to all of our literary people out there. It's one of my weaker subjects, despite how often I read, which is all the time. I say that in particular for Linda if she's listening, but I don't actually read all the time. That's a lie. Anyway, we are going into the second half, and I am at 35 out of 39 points. What are our categories for round four? And now I'm 246 wager.
2, 4, and 6. Correct. All right. So we have science/literature.
Do all your people yell science whenever you do a science question?
At one of my shows, they do. At the other, a little bit. I've tried to get it going at where I play. It hasn't taken off.
Whenever I'm at a venue where they do that, whatever the next category is, I will then really loud yell that category just so it doesn't feel left out, which usually gets some. And I'd love to know the history behind the whole science thing. It's such a thing.
Well, it's from the song that She Blinded Me With Science.
But when did it start at pub trivia? Like, who started that?
Oh,
that's
a good question. That's a good question. All right, so science/literature.
Well, what are the other categories? Science,
literature, geography, and art.
And art. Okay.
All right. Science/literature. The chemical frost ban, which helps reduce the amount of crops lost to cold temperatures, was dubbed Ice Minus by critics, reflecting the name of the world-destroying substance Ice-9 in the 1963 novel Cat's Cradle by what author and one of my literary heroes?
That'd be Kurt Vonnegut. He wrote, that's a 6-pointer. Yeah.
Yes.
6 points for Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah. And he is indeed. And I met him a couple of times, including just one time running into him randomly. He was sitting on a bench on Fifth Avenue in New York.
Oh, that's fascinating. I used to have a softball team. We were called the Slaughterhouse Nine.
Nice. Yeah. No, Kurt Vonnegut years ago wrote a play that never went anywhere. It's called Make Up Your Mind. And I happened to get tickets to the inaugural reading of it. And I loved it. It was hilarious. And so this time, years later, when I ran into him in New York, I went up to him and said, "Hi, I was there at the reading of Make Up Your Mind. I thought it was great." And he looked at me and he said, "You're one of about 11.
All right. Very nice. And let's go on to geography.
All right. Mount Greylock, the highest point in Massachusetts, is located in what sub-range of the Appalachians? The same named area where my parents live and where I went to summer camp was named among the 12 last great places by the Nature Conservancy.
So I hope you're looking for the Berkshires. I think that's, well, I think that's like the main area. Read the question again for me, will you?
Sure. Mount Greylock, the highest point in Massachusetts, is located in what sub-range of the Appalachians? The same named area where my parents live and where I went to summer camp was named among the 12 last great places by the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the Berkshires, but I think there is like a name for the action. And the reason I kind of know this is I attempted to summit Mount Greylock last April, but the road that I had to drive to get to where I could do the hike up was closed, and it doesn't open until like late May. So I was
Mhm.
just there about a year ago, and I'm actually driving out to Boston next month again. And again, I probably won't be able to summit it because the road won't be open, which is a shame. But I know that the Berkshires are out that way. But there's something I don't know the word, but I think it starts with a T that they call them the something mountains, and I don't know what the word is. But I'm going to say Berkshires, and I'm going to go for two, even though I'm not confident in my art, because I'm not sure if the Berkshires is technically right.
The Berkshires is correct. That
Okay.
area is referred to as the Berkshires. And my
Do you know
parents
what mountain
live
range
in
I'm thinking of? Like, isn't there a name for like the mountain? Like, it's like a sub range of.
that one. I do not know. I'll be seeing my
Okay.
parents later today. I will ask if there's another
All
name over
right.
there. All right. And so round four, question three in art. Hanging in my living room is a print of Bridge on the Riu by André Derain. Derain was a leader in what art movement, most commonly associated with Henri Matisse, whose name comes from the French for wild beasts?
All right. Henri Matisse. That movement. Oh boy. Oh, I guess it's not cubism. Fauvism. Fauvism could be wild beast. Let's go with Fauvism. And we have 4 points because it's all I have left.
And Fauvism is correct.
Oh, good.
I was not an artist I was ever familiar with. And then when my son was very little, we went to the Museum of Modern Art in New York and saw this painting. It's like, wow. And for years I was trying to get a print of it, and there it wasn't available. Like the museum had not licensed it out to make prints of, and then finally they
Oh,
did. So
yeah, not an
all
artist I
right.
am familiar with either. So I'm glad it was a question that was accessible to me. All righty.
Okay.
We are on to round five.
And your categories are automobiles, names, and business. In automobiles, in 2014, the 10th generation of what Chevrolet model, introduced in 1958, was named the number one affordable large car by US News and World Report. My first car was a sixth generation model, and the nameplate was retired in 2020.
Okay, so the Chevy Impala, I know, is the first thing that comes to mind. I'm trying to think. I think they did retire that recently. I don't know enough about it. I'm not confident. Game seems to be getting a little harder at this point. I think I'm going to go Impala for four.
And Impala is correct.
Okay.
My first car that the hand-me-down car that I got was a 1980 Impala, and that thing
Mine
was
was a 1985 Honda Accord.
but that Impala was a serious hunk of steel. Somebody ran a stop sign and plowed into me, and basically they dented my hubcap. That was the extent of the damage. Meanwhile, their grill was on the ground. Their entire front end was bashed in.
They don't make them like they used to. All righty. Names.
All
Let's
right.
see what we got for
Yes.
names.
What girl's name is a French variation of a Hebrew name that means God is my judge? My late sister shared this name with actresses Deadweiler and Fischel, and it is also the given first name of Elvis's granddaughter, Riley Keough.
Okay, read that to me one more because Riley Keough's first name is Danielle, so I want to know if I'm supposed to say Danielle or if I'm supposed to say something else. So give me the question again, so I hear if I'm
Sure.
yeah.
What girl's name is a French variation of a Hebrew name that means God is my judge? My late sister shared this name with actresses Deadweiler and Fischel, and it is also the given first name of Elvis's granddaughter, Riley Keough.
Okay, so I mean Danielle. I'm trying to so Donnie or Devori maybe is the Jewish Danielle though for 6 points because I'm
Yes.
fairly positive Riley Keough's first name is Danielle.
And it is, and it's the French version, a French version of Daniel.
Duh. Okay. I tried to make that way more difficult than it needed to be. But again, that's a good example of I wasn't going to get that off the name part. I got that because I know Riley Keough's first name. So,
Right.
all
And
right. And businesses for two.
all right. And since 2019, I have worked for what health and wellness company, founded in 1963 by Queens homemaker Jean Nidetch, who had a habit of binging on Malamar cookies.
Okay. I'm sure the Malamar cookie thing probably is a clue somehow, but I don't I don't know. Do you work for CVS for 2 points?
I do not.
All right.
I work for Weight Watchers.
Oh, yeah. See, probably should have thought that one through a little more. That's one of those questions that I was so lost when you were asking, and I kind of gave up on it, and I shouldn't have because I hear the answer and I go, "Oh, the marsh, the that." And like I said, you put that in there for a reason, right? It wasn't just there
Mhm.
to take up space and add more words to the question. A good question
Correct.
writer does that. So that's my bad. Missed that. So I'm now at 57, I believe, out of
Mhm.
63.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
And
Okay. You missed a two, a one, and one of the midpoint. All right.
yeah.
So in round 6, you have sports, lost lyrics, and food.
All right.
And question 1 in sports. Between 1981 and 1997, teams from the NFC won 15 out of 17 Super Bowls. The other 2 were won by what AFC team, though it represented different cities in each? Thus far, I've seen them play 9 times.
Read that question one more time.
Between 1981 and 1997, teams from the NFC won 15 out of 17 Super Bowls. The other 2 were won by what AFC team, though it represented different cities in each? Thus far, I've seen them play 9 times.
So that would obviously be the Los Angeles and Oakland and now Las Vegas Raiders. And we'll go 6 points on that one.
That is correct. And and I am a diehard Raiders fan. And unfortunately, in those 9 games, they are 1-8. I've only seen them win once.
Stop going, man.
Actually, that's the thing that I'm doing with my son is that we're traveling around to see them play in different cities and also trying to catch a local hockey game at the same time because my son's a hockey fan. So we're
Yeah.
probably going to the Boston area later this year because they're playing in New England. All right, lost lyrics from what 1985 song, one of 2 I ever learned to play on the piano, does the following line come? I wanted to be with you alone and talk about the weather, but traditions I can trace against the child in your face won't escape my attention.
Oh God. Yeah, I'm an 80s hairband guy. I think you know that, but
Yep.
this sounds more new wavy in my head and I'm not going to know the song, I'm going to just say everybody wants to rule the world.
For 2 points, I assume.
Oh, for 2 points. Yeah, I'm not going to get it right. So
You got the right band, but the wrong
no,
song.
Tears for Fears. Is it Head Over
It is
Heels?
Tears for Fears. That's it.
No.
Head over heels.
You know what? Maybe there was something in my head that was saying that I knew that. Yeah. All right. Well, my
and
bad.
and when I first started doing trivia and I'd get these kinds of questions, I would do that all the time. That I'd put down the wrong song by the right group.
Yeah.
All right. And your last question in the regular game in food, described as an oblong sandwich of either devil's food or banana flavored cake with white cream filling, what Hostess product was discontinued for the last time, much to my dismay, in 2020?
So Devil's Food, Hostess Food. Oh, I used to eat these. I didn't not the Devil's Food one. I had the other one, Zingers, right? Zingers. I used to eat those as a kid. But I don't like chocolate, so I ate the yellow, the banana ones, whatever. So Zingers for 4 because that's all I have left.
And that is incorrect. Zingers are
Oh,
still available.
What are these?
These are Suzy Q's.
Oh, I didn't know they made non-chocolate Suzy Q's.
Yeah, when they first came out, there was chocolate and banana, and they came back at one point in about 2015 because after Hostess went out of business for about a year, and then they came back, they relaunched them. They weren't quite as good. They reformulated them. They were better, but then they're gone. And that was one of those. That was my go-to snack cake for much of my childhood, which explains why I now work for Weight Watchers.
Just saying, I could have used the CCR reference in that clue. I'm just saying, could have gotten there with that. But yeah. So all right, so I'm at 63 out of 75. I'd had that game played well because the last round was clearly the hardest for me. It was the only one I missed 2 questions in. Although my wagering was spot on, so I didn't cost myself anything there. But I'm still 12 off of perfect. What is our final round category?
Well, I am trying to decide about. I'm going to go back to the original question I was because we talked about how we don't like the put them in order questions, but I'm going to get one anyway because that's what I originally asked for this game. So
That's fine. Sure.
let me
We want to play it like the game played. That's good.
yeah,
We'll do that. And then what is my max wager? Is it 15, 20, 30?
20, 20.
20. Okay.
Anywhere between 0 and 20.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm going all in because, I'm not playing against anybody technically, and go big or go home. Obviously,
Okay.
in a real bar situation, if I had the lead, I would bet to protect the lead. And if I didn't have the lead, I'd most likely go all in, depending on the team that was chasing me and how far ahead the team in front was. But so in most scenarios, I'm
Okay.
going all in unless I'm betting from the lead. So,
All right. And so your category for your final question is television.
okay, I like TV. I watched a lot.
And the question is, put these TV series, all of which are among my personal favorites, in order by the number of episodes in the show's original run, most to
Ooh, I like
least.
that. Okay.
And they are Bob Hart's Abishola, 6 Feet Under, Sports Night, and The Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone.
Ooh, all right. So you've chose. I haven't watched Bob Hart's Abishola. Sports Night, I think, is going to be most likely the least because I believe, as great as that show was, it only ran for, I believe, one season. Now, the question is the original Twilight Zone, I think that was quite successful. Like, I don't think it's. So I want to say that ran for 4 or 5 years. No, I don't know if it was, like today you got 20 something episodes a season, right? 20 for a full
Mm-hmm.
season network TV show. You're going to have anywhere from 22 to 26 episodes in a season. If I think the original Twilight Zone ran for at least 5 seasons, we're looking at a minimum of 110 to 130 episodes. Sports
Mm-hmm.
Night had, I believe, only one season, and I don't even know if it was a full season. So I don't think that had more than 25 episodes. Oh, maybe it had 2 seasons. So maybe it had 40 episodes. Oof, okay, so but it's still low, much lower than I think the Twilight Zone. Now I watched every episode of 6 Feet Under. I love Michael C. Hall. I love that TV show, and I know that it ran for 5 seasons, but it was an HBO show, and each of the seasons was like 11 episodes or maybe 12 episodes. So that's only going to be, 55 to 60 episodes, I think. Now, question is Bob Hart's Abishola. I know that's a relatively recent show. I know that it ran on network TV, and I know that it ran for much longer than I assume it ran. The question is, okay, if it's network TV and it ran 3 seasons, it's going to have at least 60 episodes, which I think it did. So I think it has to be above 6 Feet Under. I think I've decided Twilight Zone has to be number one because I think that's over 100. I think I've decided Sports Night has to be number four. And I think I'm going to go Twilight Zone, Bob Hart's Abishola, 6 Feet Under, and Sports Night in that order from greatest to least. And I've bet 20 points. So I'm very curious if I have logicked that out correctly, or if Bob Hart's Abishola didn't run as long as I thought, or maybe the Twilight Zone is the real kicker, and that one was like one of those where the original ran for one season and then it was brought back, which is possible. But yeah.
Well, I will say this. I, at one point, subscribed to Time Life to get the original Twilight Zone on cassette on VHS, and they would send me 4 episodes at a time. And I ended up with 39 tapes. So the Twilight Zone had 156 episodes, the original one.
Wow. All right. Good.
It ran for 5 years, and there were roughly 30 odd per. Bob Hart's Abishola ran for 5 years and totaled 95 episodes. 6 Feet Under, as you said, is 5 seasons on HBO. It finished with 63 episodes.
Well, that's more than I would have thought.
And Sports Night ran for 2 seasons and only accumulated 45 episodes. So the correct answer is Twilight Zone, Bob Hart's Abishola, 6 Feet Under, and Sports Night. You are correct, sir.
All right. So I end up with 83 out of a possible 95 in that game. I don't know if those listening did better, worse. if you could have helped me. I know some of the people I normally play with would have been of great help on Miss Hoover's book, which I missed, and I'm sorry. I should go read it as penance, but I won't. But and so Dave, you're going to be maybe starting your own game somewhere, right? And you're trying to think of maybe a name for it. Will you change the format up? Will you do your own thing, do you think? Or
I probably the only thing major that I will change is just not hold myself to specific kinds of questions in the sense of, true false questions, and always having a lyrics question, not necessarily. But the main thing that I've started doing, that I've been experimenting with is for the final question, because as you and I talked about, that having the put these things in order, that because it's so random, and sometimes they're not possible to figure out. I wanted something that had a little more knowledge behind it, like that you could put your knowledge to it. And so what I've started doing is a question where there are a lot of possible answers and that you can list up to 20 correct answers. And if they're all correct, you get 20 points. But if any of your answers are incorrect, you get 0 points for the question. So that you can't lose points as you would with a wagering question, but you can get up to
that's
points.
that's interesting. There's a company out of Oklahoma called Questionable Company out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, run by Tim and Cheyenne. I don't know if you
Yeah. Oh,
are
yes.
familiar with either of those gentlemen, but they do a final. And I'm not going to say exactly what it is. At some point, I'll have them on an episode, and they can tell me what it is. But their final is somewhat in that vein, I think, and I think those are fun because especially if you're making them lists where some of the answers everybody's going to know, right? Like if you say like
Right.
countries of the world that start with the letter G, everybody's going to get Germany and probably Greece. And, not everybody will come up with Guinea or Guinea-Bissau or Gabon or Gambia. Maybe the geography words nerds will, or Grenada or Guyana, whatever. And then you'll have people that'll say stuff like Greenland and Guam, where you're like, oh, sorry, those aren't independent nations. Those are just territories. So yeah, those questions can be fun and interesting. Well, I wish you luck in embarking on that. I hope that it happens. I think that you're a pretty good question writer and a pretty creative guy, and I think it'd be a lot of fun to have a new game on there. And then whenever you do, you'll come back on and we'll run that game through. And you'll have to come up with a clever name. Have you narrowed it down at
Mhm.
all? I know you had a couple of choices you were thinking about.
Well, based on the polling that I've done, one name has kind of stood out. I mean, it's gotten much more of a positive response than all the others, and that is actually a nickname that was given to me by Adam and John Spees on an episode of Throwback Trivia Takedown. Strange enough that I wasn't even on, but and that is Trivia Monster,
Oh, I
and
like that. You'll have
and
to throw in a Lady Gaga question
yes,
for that. Yeah.
and
Or at least a monsters related question in every show.
yeah, and I actually did for a while was using that as the name that we played under. My son and I, when we went to trivia, and I had a couple of Cookie Monster shirts that I would wear when we would go and play for that reason.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one thing in doing this podcast, I have come across all sorts of different trivia companies. I've got Soul Brain Trivia is going to be on it, or was on one of the first episodes of Quizzing in America. There's Quizaholics, Raise the Bar Trivia, Questionable Company, Questionable Productions, Public Education. There is an LGBTQ run company in Providence, Rhode Island that calls themselves Curiosity, which I thought was clever. There's a company in California, Risky Quizness. My company was Brain Bash Trivia. Dr. Stein is a company in Texas and Georgia. I like that name in particular. So there's all sorts of great names that are out there and used by various trivia companies. Well, anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me playing the game, or telling me a little bit about what you do, and having a game for me to play and for listeners to play along with. Appreciate that, David. Good luck with everything trivia related. I hope to get to a live show that you're hosting one of these days. And is there any last
Sounds
words
good.
that you want to say?
Just at this point, we are recording this on March 16th. A quick shout out to my mother-in-law, actually, who's been very, very sick the past couple of days. So we do hope we're
Oh,
thinking of her and just
well,
wishing her the best.
Yeah, a speedy recovery for her. And with that said and done, this is Jeremy signing off for Quizzing in America. We will see you next time when I believe, if we do these in order, we will have the legendary Russ Friedwald from the Trivia Factory. And that is all she wrote. Bye bye.